Okay, good morning, welcome. This is our last series here at the 11 o'clock Women and Gender Studies series. And we're so delighted to have partnership and support from the Career Services Center. We will have a presentation about the Career Services Center from Nikki Marzano. My name is Dr. Suzanne Andres, and I teach in the Women and Gender Studies department. Please help yourself to any brochures in the back if you'd like to learn about our program. And a brief announcement is that next Thursday, we're having a screening sponsored by the Women and Gender Studies Department and also the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. It's of the film Poverty Incorporated. This is not yet released. It's not available on Netflix, not available on Amazon. And John Carroll will be showing this movie. It's about the development work with 150 interviews shot over 4 years in 20 countries. The film challenges the notion that systematic foreign aid is a solution for development, and it proposes and shows some actual solutions. So it's very provocative. It's here in the Dolan Center, so it's Thursday at 7 p.m. All right, so as we are on the topic of career and choosing your career path, I know a lot of you are in your first year at John Carroll. How many of you have been to the Career Center? Can you raise your hand? Okay, so Ms. Marzano, you have quite a job to do. So please, Ms. Marzano, if you would tell us about the Career Services.
Sure. I don't think I need the mic. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. We're not with the camera though, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't need to.
That's how I feel. It's like too much.
I'm Nikki Marzano. I'm an assistant director in the Career Center. So first of all, I just want to applaud you for coming to events like this, where you're going to gather career information, and these are little puzzle pieces to help you build your path to figure out what you want to do later. It's a great chance to network. Maybe if one of the things you learned today really strikes you, maybe one of these ladies would be willing to keep in touch with you and continue to offer some advice. The Career Center is open to all students, so wherever you are in your curriculum, if you are a first-year student to a senior, there's definitely a misconception among some students that the Career Center is for a graduating senior who needs to find a job. And that is not at all our only service, and it's actually not at all the way we want to be perceived. We can help you anywhere you are in that process. So if you are just trying to figure out what major you're interested in, we can help with things like that. Or if you know you love your major, but you have no idea what you want to do with that major, we can help you sort that out. If you're further along, we can get your materials ready so that you can start looking for internships. You can try out some of the things that you're learning in class, maybe have internships opportunities where you can continue to define your vocational path. I strongly encourage you to consider internships, even if you are dead set, you're going to grad school, get some internship experience under your belt, get some experience in the field. It's just as good to hate your internship as it is to love your internship. Better to find out now that you do not want to be in an industry or in a field than after you've committed a lot of time and energy into it. So we are in the house on Belvoir next to the tennis courts. We're next to the tennis courts. Counseling Center is right next to us, another house. So we're slightly off campus, but we're not that far away. So if you haven't been over and would like to just kind of check in, if you're a sophomore, you've already been invited to come over to meet with one of our peer assistants who will show you the resources that we have. But if you are a first-year student, you're welcome to come over, check things out, and then as you move along and you have some questions, need some advice, then just go ahead and call, and the person who answers the phone will take some information and figure out the right person for you to meet with. So, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you very much. I'll just briefly introduce the names of our speakers. So we have Andrea Mueller, who is with Marketing and Sales Manager at the Hofbrauhaus. How many of you have been to the Hofbrauhaus? All right. And Sarah Constanza from the Stay Well Program Manager at Hunger Network of Cleveland, or Greater Cleveland. Mary Lavinia Butler, who is the Associate Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio. And Ambassador Heather Hodges, the President and Ambassador in Residence of the Cleveland Council on World Affairs. Okay. All right, so we'll start with Andrea. And we'll have a question and answer after everyone's spoken. So you might jot your questions down, and then at the end we'll collectively have a Q&A.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. I think we need some more coffee. Thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to be here and kind of just share with you my experiences and what I've been going through, I guess, the past few years, just as far as my career goes. As Suzanne mentioned, I am the marketing and sales manager over at Hofbrauhaus Cleveland. So I know two of you have been there before. And what did you think of it when you went?
It was a lot of people.
A lot of people. Yeah.
So you're doing your job, right?
Yeah, I know, exactly. I definitely recommend you all coming out and stopping over at the restaurant. It is a 24,000 square foot German restaurant and dining experience is what we call it. And it is actually sanctioned by the Hofbrauhaus in Munich, Germany. So I'm not sure if any of you have been to Germany, Europe, seen the Hofbrauhaus over there, but it is a 400-year-old restaurant that really has so much rich history over in Germany. And so essentially what I do from a marketing standpoint is I need everything to be verified and looked over by the officials at the Hofbrauhaus in Munich, Germany. So no pressure or anything, but it's a very, very cool job. And I really never thought I would be in the position that I'm in. I went to Ohio State, and I was undecided for about 2 years. They were about to kick me out of the exploration program because they said, you need to figure out what you want to do. And I had no clue because every opportunity seemed like something that I would be interested in. Just meeting people, and I knew I wanted to work with people, but I didn't know to what capacity, and I didn't really even understand all the majors that were available. So I was trying to figure out what would be best for me and for my personality and my interests, and so kind of just fell into communications. Started taking classes and realized, it was something that I was passionate about. So did that, and then I majored as well in German, very appropriately. And I didn't think I'd be majoring in German. I just took a few classes. I had been speaking German all my life and started taking classes in a college setting and just continued with it. And I studied abroad for a little bit, which I would highly encourage all of you to do because it is fantastic. So I studied abroad and just kept taking classes very nonchalantly. And then before I knew it, I was like one class away from majoring in German. So I just figured, I'll just do that as well. So I double majored communications German and I minored in writing. I graduated from Ohio State in 2012. So it's kind of interesting for me to be on this end of the classroom because I'm used to sitting where you guys are, and I remember it like it was just yesterday, so it's kind of getting used to that. But I graduated, and very similar to how I started college, I had no idea what I wanted to do career-wise. I knew I wanted to do PR and marketing, but I really didn't understand what that was. I had internships in college, which sort of helped me mold what I, was interested in. I interned with Yelp, if you guys are familiar with the online review site, so that was awesome. And I interned with a PR association in Columbus, and I interned with an arts council in Columbus as well. And then I interned with a little German company, naturally. So kind of had a rough idea, but still was just very confused. I really did not know what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to take a job that I wasn't passionate about. But, you know, you kind of live and learn. And I was offered my first job about 9 months after I graduated. So I did a lot of traveling after I graduated from school and took my first job at a shopper marketing agency. Now, does anybody know what shopper marketing is? No. Okay, just like I thought. So I was actually creating barcodes for Kraft Foods. I was a Kraft food contractor at a very small marketing agency here in Cleveland. And, you know, it was one of those things where I really did not know what I was getting myself into. And took the job, started at the job, and I can't say that I fell in love with it. It was actually a very hard adjustment for me just because I had this grand idea as to kind of what I wanted to do. But I knew that this was a step in the right direction. So I was at this marketing agency for a year and a half, and I became a team leader on my team and was responsible for executing marketing initiatives across the country in various grocery stores. So not as glamorous as this dream I had of, you know, writing and traveling and doing all this PR work. But took the job and was there, learned a lot, and I worked with all women, which was pretty interesting. I mean, there were 3 men that worked over at the agency, but it was primarily women. And so I didn't really have too much to compare, I guess, as far as, you know, women versus men in a professional setting, just because it was mostly all women. So I was then offered my current job now, June 2014. So my dad is actually in a German polka band, and he knew the gentleman that was opening up this German restaurant downtown and asked if I would be interested in doing the marketing. And again, I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was kind of picturing like a Sound of Music gig where, I don't know, I'd have to wear the little dress and run around and do whatever. I really was very unsure, but it sounded a little bit better than what I was doing at the time. And so I took the job, and my life has completely gone upside down after taking the job, but in the best way possible. I have learned so much in regards to how a business is run and how to properly communicate with people and how to work with people that have very different personalities than you do. I manage all of the private events there, so I plan weddings and plan reunions, birthday parties, and so on. I execute all the marketing initiatives and run the social media, so I'm sure you guys all have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everything. And so that's what I did for a living. And I would write press releases and just anything you can imagine that was marketing related. And so, you know, it's been a great learning experience, but to kind of tie into the topic of your class, you know, being a woman in this position has been very interesting. So I don't know if anyone has worked in a restaurant, whether you've been a hostess or host, busser, anything like that, server maybe, but the restaurant industry is very, very different than corporate America. And it is actually primarily male-dominated. There are quite a few women that work in the restaurant industry, but for a while I was basically the only woman that was working on my team of people. It was all men. And, you know, it's definitely different. It's not, I wouldn't say it's bad or better, but there's a lot of adjusting that kind of comes with that. And I felt like I really needed to prove myself even more so than I did at the marketing agency where it was women that were working there. And I don't mean that out of anything, but I had 2 things kind of going, I don't want to say against me, but that were working not in my favor. And number one is obviously my age. I'm a little bit younger than most people would be in this position. And I was a woman working amongst all of these men. So I really felt that I had to go in and be as confident as I possibly could be. And I think my number one point of advice would be, just in general, when looking for jobs and trying to figure out what you want to do, just be confident in everything you do. And it doesn't matter if you're a man, if you're a woman, because that's totally overlooked when you are just confident in what you're doing. And that speaks volumes. That's one thing that it's taken me quite a little bit to learn. But now I feel like I can speak to so many different, I guess, departments of the restaurant where I know I have the confidence to talk to anybody because I know what I'm talking about. So that's my number one thing, is no matter what you're doing, just go in and own it. Even if you don't like your job, just think you're gonna change the world and you can make a difference no matter what position you're in. And any kind of gender inequality or any kind of, tension that you might feel in a professional setting will hopefully kind of dissipate because you know that you can do it. So that was something that was a bit challenging for me to understand. And just be a go-getter, kind of push the envelope a little bit and ask the questions and make sure that you are the one that's driving whatever project or the business or whatever you're working on. Be that driving force, because essentially, it really does not matter if you're a man or a woman in this world. It matters if you're the one that's gonna make things happen. And if you keep that in mind and really make sure that you're just completing things and having things if there's a deadline, make sure everything's on time, that in itself will speak beyond any kind of, I guess, gender role that, society has sort of molded for us. So it's been a very interesting journey, and I really can't wait to see where it takes me in the future. But right now I can say confidently that I'm very, very happy and I'm very proud of myself for, I guess, being where I'm at today. Thank you.
And Sarah, and if you could say your name again.
Okay. I too don't need this, but hopefully I don't blow you guys away. Hi guys, how you doing today? Awesome. You do need that coffee. I'm Sarah Continenza. I work for the Hunger Network of Greater Cleveland. I manage a wellness project for the organization called the Stay Well Project. We are a partnership with university hospitals, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but let me give you a little bit of background. So I am 33 years old, and I started college right after high school. Did not know what I wanted to do, never gave myself a chance to figure that out, never gave myself the volunteer experience that I should have gotten. So I ended up getting my undergrad from also Ohio State University, go Bucks. And I got a Bachelor of Arts in English, Bachelor of Science in Education. Thinking I'm gonna teach everyone, save the planet, it's all awesome. And I was gonna do Teach for America after I graduated. And for some reason I didn't get in. I don't know, I was a really high performer, and it was just like one of those things where I think it was God's hand almost, because what I ended up doing next was I joined the Peace Corps. So I was like, I'm not ready to, enter the real world yet. I still don't really know what I wanted to do. And if you don't really know for sure, follow the advice that you need to take the time to figure it out. You're just gonna waste a lot of money and time. So I went to Burkina Faso, West Africa, for 2 years. It's the reason Suzanne and I bonded. She spent some time there as well. And my sector that I was part of was actually the Female Empowerment and Education Group. So what I did was I was sent to a tiny rural Muslim village where daughters get married off at age 12 as third or fourth wives of 50-year-old men and are pregnant by 13. And I told them, hey, educate your girls. And they're like, why? we're just gonna sell them off into marriage. Why would we spend any money on them? That's weird. They're just workhorses. The men drink tea all day under trees and the women do all the work, at least in the rural areas where we are. And basically, I think more than anything what I did there was I was that example. At the time I was 22 and I was just independent. I didn't need a man. I lived alone. I was educated. I learned their languages and did my own thing. And they were like, what is this? It must be, well, maybe she's different because she's white, you know? And in Africa, you're the third gender as a white female because you're not one of the dudes, right? You know, you can get in with the women, but you're white, so you can also get in with the men. You know, so it's a whole new dynamic. And what I ended up doing was just cozying all day long with the guys. You know, I would talk to them, I would tell them about why it's important, and I'd always take the approach of, guess what? It helps you if you help the women. You'll get a more delicious meal. You know, if she has some more time freed up, she can maybe sell some more of the biscuit on the street and make some more money for the fam, you know? And I could see some things clicking, but it's hard. You're only there for 2 years, so like, you're never gonna see like the growth from the seeds you planted. And now it's been a long time since any volunteers have been there because of the war in Mali. A lot of refugees have come down there. But let me tell you something. Africa will change your entire perspective of reality. It is the most amazing place you ever go with, even though the dude factor, you know, really, really beautiful people. Their whole culture is about hospitality. They knew I had more stuff. They knew I had more things, but they welcomed me with things and greeted me with gifts and, you know, treated me like family. The whole village was my family. So that changed my whole perspective of everything. I came back to America, rosy colored glasses shattered off my face, never to see my face again. And it changed my whole path. I thought I was just gonna be a teacher. Well, I still thought that for a while. I wasn't ready yet to enter the real world when I came back from Africa. So I ended up moving to Japan for 2 years. I basically went from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. Went from peeing in a hole to talking toilets with heated seats. And it was crazy. But I taught English there for 2 years and I loved it. And now that's a very patriarchal society. And as an educated woman kind of going in, forging her own way, it was unique, right? You know, mostly the women are subjugated there for the most part in a different way. Not as obvious as in Africa, but you can definitely see it. I did that for a couple years and you know, before that, I never really thought, I'm gonna live in Cleveland again. I always thought, Cleveland, man, that's a boring place. I love my family, I'll visit them, but you know. And then I realized that every single thing that I loved about Japan, we had it, and sometimes better and usually cheaper here. You know? You wanna go see a world-class art museum? You're on that train for hours. And you're paying a lot of money. You wanna go see a symphony? Good luck, you know? And everyone would rave about the fall color, and all I could think of was Metro Parks have it going on, right? I'm like, I should go back to Cleveland and get another chance. So I came back, and I was all ready to save Cleveland. This is before the Renaissance, so I'm like, I gotta save Cleveland. Single-handedly, I'm gonna come back and do it. I came back, I was teaching English at Case for a little bit, and then I got this opportunity to work at the Hunger Network of Greater Cleveland. And it was really my Peace Corps, I think, that got me into it, because I was an education background, but it was also my connection to the executive director. She was the aunt of my boyfriend at the time, so that helped too. But that wasn't why I got it, but it was how I knew about it. And it's very important to know the right people, guys. You know, confidence is key, but going out there and meeting people and getting those internships and volunteer experiences, that's gonna open those doors. Because you can have a banging resume but not know anyone, and you'll probably not get that shoe in. Very important, get that networking done. Say yes to things, do it. You will not regret it. So I got this job, and like our friend Andrea said, it changed everything. My whole life is different now. This project that was started with funding from Mount Sinai Health Foundation was basically there to kind of bridge the gap between hunger and health. Now think about it, you can't afford to eat. Are you gonna be able to buy a bunch of veggies? If you live in an inner city community without any grocery stores, you gonna buy any veggies? No, food is medicine. But unfortunately, all levels of society are not treating food like medicine anymore. We are poisoning ourselves with what's not even really food anymore. Food-like substances, right? And it's an epidemic. Now, if everyone's facing this epidemic, think about what's happening in the low-income communities. Now think about the levels of disproportionate obesity, hypertension, diabetes. I call it hyperdiabetes. I mean, it's crazy how much this is being experienced. So what we're doing with this project is going into the hunger centers and the hot meal programs. And with the partnerships that I've created, partnerships, you get more bang with your buck and it helps you along the way, is that we do health screenings, cholesterol, sugar, blood pressure, BMI, risk assessments, hearing and vision screenings, flu shots, all kinds of stuff. That's the clinical part. We also navigate people to find a doctor, get on Medicaid and all that. But it's more than that. Like I said, food is medicine. This program emphasizes diet and lifestyle as a manner to prevent, manage, and reverse illness. And through a strongly plant-based approach, we have actually got so many people to lose weight, lower their blood pressure, avoid ever having to get on meds, or getting off their meds, living longer, being healthier and happier. You know, some people would start by saying the argument, well, I'm gonna die of something, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but when you're alive, don't you want to live? How can you really be alive if you're sluggish because you have no energy because you didn't eat food? You had a bunch of non-food that doesn't nourish you. It just gives you empty calories, so we're overfed and undernourished. So we need to rethink this. So through this strongly plant-based approach and with exercise classes and linking people to resources, we're basically empowering. And that's the key word there, empowerment. Because you can give stuff to people all day long. You know, you can give them grocery bags, make it through the month. But if you're not empowered to change things in your life that are causing the circumstances in the first place, it's always going to be the same. And you're always going to be putting a Band-Aid on a problem. So instead of keeping to put a Band-Aid on, why don't we just heal the wound? And that's what we're working on. So that's what I do. But like I said, it's because of partnerships and opportunities. I know Andrea through Engage Cleveland, which is a young professional nonprofit organization. And, you know, it's been amazing because I've been able to network. All of a sudden I'm on like 4 boards. I don't know what happened. I blinked an eye, I'm on 4 boards. I don't know what happened. And, you know, I'm doing stuff in South Euclid where I live. I have a community group going just kind of on the side. You know, we got a bike track built and all kinds of stuff. And what I realized is once you get that ball rolling, it'll keep rolling, keep rolling, and keep rolling. And as a woman, I had very special leverage, right? Because, you know, I'm passionate and it's cute, kind of, right? But I took advantage of it and I charged forth with the confidence. That's what you have to do. You have to own it. You have to own it. Because there are going to be people of all genders, of every type, that are going to doubt you, question you, and wonder, well, why are you doing this? You know, you don't make money. You're a master's degree and you're making that? I'm like, yeah, but I love what I do. I go every day and love what I do. I get hugs from people that lost weight, and I get to make a difference. And you know, this has opened doors. I have a fellowship at Case now, and I'm doing research, and we're learning how to get grants with data that I'm collecting on my program. I mean, the opportunities are endless. But it's because I never stopped forging those relationships that I needed. And that's super important for anyone. It doesn't matter what your gender is. But, you know, remember that in a lot of ways, as a woman, we do start a little bit lower in a lot of ways. And we have to work a little bit harder just to get where men start in society. It's getting less than that. But don't let that discourage you. Let it empower you more to keep doing the things you're doing, because people need you. And in my sector, it's probably 95% women, opposite of what Andrew's experiencing. And, you know, it's okay. I mean, another thing I would say, though, if you're in an office full of women, be each other's allies. Don't work against each other. And I have noticed that often we are not each other's allies, and there's this level of competitiveness and stuff. Be each other's allies, and then you will do more with less. Okay? That was pretty quick, so anyway, thank you.
I don't know about you, but I'm inspired by both these 2 young women. And I'm looking out at the faces here, and I'm inspired by all of you, and I don't even know you yet. Because as someone said to me, they were going on and on about how horrible things are, and I said, I look around at young women, and I know the world is going to be just perfectly fine, because they're strong, they're bold, they network, they talk, they connect, and they don't really care what other people think in terms of who they are. They know they can do it, and what you need is confidence. And never, ever forget that. Guys, you too, but I'm mainly talking to the gals in the room today. Couple things that you've heard, and I want to emphasize. Networking, mentoring, never forget to pay it forward. Internships, learn as much as you can. Get out, I don't care where you work, if you want to wait on tables, if you want to work, whatever you do, because you will be learning how to work with other people. And that is absolutely key. And even if you don't like the job you're doing, you've learned something from it. You know, I'll never do that again. And that is really important. Internships, like I said, learn how to work in an organization. And I say all these things because obviously I'm much older than these two are. And I have been very fortunate in that I have worked in a variety of places. By training, I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer in Silicon Valley for more years than I want to count, 23 years. I was fortunate in that I worked at a small law firm that grew up to be the biggest law firm in the world, which was not a good thing. But that small law firm, back when I started practicing, there weren't many women practicing law. And I immediately found a mentor. A mentor is critical to, no matter what you get into, find a mentor, find somebody you can talk to, find somebody who will take an interest in you. And then as you progress, you become a mentor to somebody else. Always remember, pay it forward, because that's how women are going to succeed. But I was a lawyer in Silicon Valley for many years, and I worked in a high-tech law firm. As my friends say, you worked on the dark side. I was a corporate lawyer. And one of my clients was Steve Jobs, who never listened to any of my advice. And I said, you'll pay me now or pay me later, but you will pay me. But what I also learned at that law firm was they were very big on giving forward and giving into the community, because we all realized we gained so much from the community we practiced in terms of our practice, our clients, and our work, that we had to give back. And that was something that was absolutely wonderful. Every lawyer in that firm had to learn how to give back, whether it was pro bono work, or being on the board of a nonprofit, or being a volunteer somewhere. And that taught all of us much more than we'd ever learn in law school. We learned how to work together. And when you're working at a law firm, you learn how to work together because you work on a team and you work hard, and you're there all hours of the night, and your peers become your family, which was always really interesting. But we learned to work together, and we learned to give. And that is something that I'm very grateful for. Because of that, I volunteered, I was on different boards, and I happened to be on the board of Planned Parenthood out in California in Silicon Valley. And I was on their board, I was a volunteer fundraiser, and I did that for many years. And I loved practicing. I was a partner in the firm. I had wonderful young women associates who worked for me. And I'm from Cleveland, and I'd always tell them about Cleveland, and they go, yeah. And I brought them back every 4 years here to Cleveland to work on the presidential election, and they'd all walk, when we'd be getting back on the plane, they'd say, that's a really neat city. And I said, yeah, someday I'm going to go back. And they said, yeah, right. But anyway, so let me go back to the Planned Parenthood. Because I volunteered there for years and in a variety of different capacities, one day the CEO of the organization, and by then it was the largest Planned Parenthood in the United States, we had 900 employees, $100 million budget, 36 health centers, and we rocked. We absolutely rocked. She called and said, let's have breakfast. And every time this woman called to have breakfast, she'd ask me to do something else. And I thought, I cannot do anything more. And I thought, and I can't say no to you either, because I know how important the work is that you do. So she said to me, I've got a job for you. And I said, another one? She said, no, this time I'm going to pay you money. And I said, whoa. And she said, I want you to be general counsel for Planned Parenthood. And I was like, wow, that's going to be interesting. She goes, but I know you. She goes, you're a workaholic. And she said, and you have too much energy. She goes, so I also want you to be in charge of fundraising. And people thought, that's kind of a weird combination. And then, but think about it, who better than a lawyer knows about money, right? So anyway, I was fundraising and I was general counsel, and I took on a variety of other things. And I used to go out to women lawyers and women in technology, and I got to stand up there and say, I have the best job in the whole world. And not many people can say that. And I still truly think that that was probably the best job I will ever have in my life, because we helped hundreds of thousands of women with their health care, with their choices, with their career. Because I used to tell all the young tech women, I'd say, you know, you can plan your life, and you are where you are because you can decide when you want to do things. As you talked about that village in Africa, it's important to make sure women are empowered, and each one of you can do that with each other. And as you go further, you're going to do that with younger women below you. So anyway, I did that for 5.5 years, and then we made the crazy decision. We decided to move back to Cleveland. And people look at me still to this day and go, you did what? And as my husband says, Cleveland is civilized. He said, it's so nice to be able to get somewhere in 10 or 15 minutes. And when I came back here, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I decided I wasn't going to practice law anymore, because practicing law in California and Silicon Valley was fun. I didn't think it would be fun in Cleveland. So I decided not to practice law, and I started networking. And lo and behold, last winter, about 3 weeks after I arrived and it snowed, and I thought, what the hell did we do coming back here to snow? I went to this wonderful women's salon that was hosted by a woman here in Shaker Heights, and it was a woman from Case Western Reserve University, and she was talking about getting more women into political office. And I thought, this is great. And who did I meet there that morning but Suzanne? And we just hit it off, and we started talking, and I've come here, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And I knew that there was a point in my life that I had to work somewhere where I could be passionate. Both of these young women are talking about passion, and you can find passion in a variety of different places. You may find it with your career. You may find, okay, well, I'm working, but what am I going to do from 5 to 10 and Saturdays and Sundays? Volunteer. Volunteer, you can learn so much. Both of these folks have wonderful organizations. Here at the
Volunteer for me.
Volunteer for her. I mean, she's at where it's at. So anyway, so I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I just started calling up people I didn't know. I said, hi, I just moved here from California, and they started laughing because there was 3 feet of snow outside. And I said, and I'm not sure what I want to do, but I'd like to talk to you. So I networked with everybody in this damn city. And I learned there are some places I don't want to work, and there were some places that I thought I really want to work. And I ended up meeting the executive director at the American Civil Liberties Union. How many people in here know what the ACLU is, who they are, what they do? Obviously, we're not doing our job well enough because you don't know what they do. But the American Civil Liberties Union has been around for about 100 years, and they basically, their clients are the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Think about that. Think about the next time you engage in a protest, the next time you want to speak and you're told to be quiet. American Civil Liberties Union protects your civil liberties. But anyway, so I ended up talking back and forth 8 months, deciding what I wanted to do, and I got a job at the American Civil Liberties Union. No, I'm not a lawyer for them. I'm raising money for them, which is a lot of fun. Why is it a lot of fun? Because you can demonstrate your passion for what they do, for the people they work for, and it calls on all my other skills that I learned as a lawyer. Persuasion. And that's something that I truly enjoy doing. But I've also learned here that I want to volunteer and do other things. After having worked 3 presidential elections in the state of Ohio, you got a lot of work to do in the state about voting rights, let me tell you. Well, not even that. I mean voting rights where people walk in the door and they say, well, you got to vote provisional because we can't find your name on the damn roll. No. So anyway, I'm volunteering with an organization called NOVA, Northeast Ohio Voter Advocacy, and we register people to vote. And some other time, I'll tell you about the night that I spent 3 hours registering people to vote at the jail. It was an amazing experience. I'm on the League of Women Voters, and I'm volunteering for a few other organizations. I gotta fill my day with stuff because I'm all about passion. And passion, and I wanna work with young women to get them to the point where they can feel passionate about their life. And don't worry, and I'm sorry, this is not gonna be a pitch for the Career Center, but don't worry if you don't know what you wanna do when you get out of college. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I wondered, I did this, I did that, and eventually I found my way. But this is my 4th career, and my guess is I'm going to have at least 1 or 2 more. And if you haven't read a book called What Color is Your Parachute, I recommend you do that because they talk about our generation are multi-careers. We don't stay at the same place for 50 years. We change and we do a variety of different things. I'm going to make a pitch for a book. If you've not read it, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And Sheryl Sandberg talks about the fact that you've got to network, you've got to find a mentor, but most important, she says, just remember, you are standing on the shoulders of many other women who came before you. They blazed the trail. That doesn't mean there still aren't trails to blaze, because all of you are going to find that that is going to be the case. And never, ever, ever forget to help somebody else. That, she said, is probably one of the most important things. And I'll close with a wonderful quote by Madeline Albright. Please tell me you know who Madeline Albright was. She was the first woman Secretary of State in the United States. And she had this great saying, and she said, there's a special place in hell reserved for women who don't help other women. So don't forget it.
Yes, love it.
Okay, my name is Heather Hodges. I'm currently the President and Ambassador in Residence of the Cleveland Council on World Affairs, which I encourage you to get to know, but I'm not going to talk to you today about the Cleveland Council on World Affairs. I'm going to talk to you about my career in the Foreign Service, in other words, the U.S. Diplomatic Service. But one interesting thing I'd like to point out is that I'm originally from Cleveland. I, in the Foreign Service, ended up living in 9 countries and for a number of years, etc. But I always said I was coming back to Cleveland, and here I am. I retired 4 years ago from the Foreign Service, and I've never regretted my decision to come back here. However, I'm going to take you away from Cleveland a little bit now in talking about the Foreign Service. I don't know if any of you have an inkling that you might be interested in a career in the Foreign Service. It really is a career. Let me say that. It's not a place to go for 1 or 2 years, but it is an extremely rewarding career in serving your country and helping the world in many ways. You just never know how. And it's also very educational to be in the Foreign Service. When I graduated from college in 1968, and I had an inkling that I was interested in something like the Foreign Service, although I think if I went back, probably my mind was to be a secretary and not a first or second or third secretary as a diplomatic position, but to be a secretary in the Foreign Service. But I thought it would be interesting. But then I heard that there really was a career that was not related to being a secretary, and I read a little bit about it, though not much was available. And it turns out that at the time that there has always been an entrance examination, but they were very forthright at the U.S. State Department that very few women were accepted into the Foreign Service. And it's true that until 1975, even a woman who had been accepted and was a Foreign Service officer, that they had limited places where they might be assigned. It was considered that, a woman wouldn't be good in this job. She just didn't get a job in that particular place. And if a woman got married until 1975, she had to resign from the Foreign Service. Now, I think this seems like, absolutely, they had to resign until 1975. Now, it seems like ancient history now, or prehistoric, but that's all over, let me assure you. And by 1980, there was a new Foreign Service Act. And beginning about 1980, and this is when I joined the Foreign Service, and beginning in 1980, there was always an emphasis on making sure that the Foreign Service was more equal and more diverse in all ways, right? Now, what did I do between 1968 and 1980? Because I, again, wasn't too sure what I wanted to do, so I ended up getting an additional, I was studying Spanish, and I got my master's in Spanish, and was in Madrid with New York University. And while I was there, I thought, well, I don't have a job to go home to, so I ended up teaching English as a second language, but to adults who were preparing to be Spanish diplomats or Spanish commercial attachés or high-level government exams in Spain where English was a requirement to actually pass the exam. And I was doing that and very happy doing that for a number of years, and then I thought, well, maybe I should get serious about going home and getting a job and getting Social Security and things like that. And I met somebody who was at the Department of State. I happened to be in Washington, somebody introduced me to this person, and when I gave my background of having lived in Spain for many years, and I was learning a lot about the world because I was working with future Spanish diplomats. We were reading The Economist, we were reading lots of good books and magazines and things like that, and it was advanced English. This person said, well, why don't you take the Foreign Service exam? And it was like a light bulb went on. It was like something that had been in the back of my mind for many, many years. And I thought, oh, I put this off. Why don't I do it, right? And I did, and I passed the exam. And I was very, very sorry to leave Madrid after having lived there for so many years. But I thought it was the right thing to do. I always felt, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back. And that was it. And so that was in 1980. I was in the Foreign Service for 31 years. And I can assure you that that women and opportunities for women have changed drastically from the time pre-1980, but also throughout the time that I was in the Foreign Service. I don't encourage, and just briefly, you come in, you go through, you don't need a language to join the Foreign Service. So all my Spanish didn't help me get in. It did help me later because I had Spanish. I could bid on many countries, where Spanish-speaking countries, and you can't be tenured in the Foreign Service until you learn a language professionally. So you need a language eventually, but not to actually pass the exam. I took the exam and I was sent off to Venezuela because I had Spanish. I was a vice consul in Caracas, later on a vice consul in Guatemala, also doing visa work and doing American citizen service work, immigration visa work and things like that. Then I was Peru desk officer in Washington. That's a common part of being in the Foreign Service, as you go back and forth from being overseas to being in Washington for a couple of years. And then I was Consul General in Bilbao, Spain, so I got back to my beloved Spain, and that's in Bilbao in northern Spain in the Basque Country. Came back to Washington, and I was the deputy director in Cuban affairs, which has now become a very fashionable thing to be able to talk about. And then after that, I became the deputy chief of mission which is the #2 at the embassy in Nicaragua. That was my big break. And I will forever be grateful to the ambassador who gave me that opportunity to actually, when you're the deputy chief of mission, you have more to do with the daily running of the embassy than the ambassador. The ambassador is very much out in representational activities, working at the highest levels of government, but the deputy chief of mission is the person that makes sure that everything is running smoothly, and it's very much in a way of a management job. And then after that, I eventually became deputy chief of mission in Peru, and then deputy chief of mission in Madrid, which is the highest job I could aspire to. I knew I would never be ambassador there because it's political appointee ambassador in Spain. But so I was thrilled to be in Madrid again. And then I was offered an opportunity to be ambassador to Moldova, which you may not even know where that is, but it's a country of the former Soviet Union between Romania and Ukraine. It's the only time I served in a position in a country that was not Spanish speaking. But they speak Russian and Romanian, so I learned enough Romanian to get by. That was one of my happiest experiences. Very interesting country with lovely people. And then I worked in human resources in Washington and then ended up as ambassador to Ecuador. Let me first stress, don't join the Foreign Service if you think the only way to be and the only thing to do in the Foreign Service is being an ambassador, because the odds are against you. There are only, we have like 400 or 250 some diplomatic posts in the world, and you're at a post for 2 or 3 years, and so that not everybody ends up being an ambassador. Sometimes it's a question of timing, sometimes it's a question of the assignments you've had, sometimes it's who knows you, who thinks you would do a good job in a particular country, and gives you that opportunity. But even without, if I hadn't had those ambassadorships, it still was a wonderful, wonderful career to be living in the various countries. Quickly, let me say that Foreign Service officers do various things. They do consular, they work on political issues, they report back to Washington on what's going on in the country, economic issues, public affairs, supporting the ambassador on getting out the message of whatever the U.S. government message is, cultural issues, things like that. And then there's also management officers. Those are the generalists. There are also a group called specialists, which do include office managers, security specialists, technical specialists, building specialists, things like that. And that the exam process is not quite as stringent as the Foreign Service exam. If you're interested in the Foreign Service, I encourage you to look up U.S. Department of State. There's a website that gives information about the Foreign Service, much more complete than obviously I'm giving you here. And it gives you, there's a practice exam, and gives you, much more information. There's no studies that are required. You just have to be an American citizen as of the time of taking the exam, and I think you have to be 18 years old. Now, you're not likely to pass the exam at 18, usually, for me, it was a second career. For most people in the Foreign Service, it's a second career. So if you do something else and you think, gee, maybe I should have thought about the Foreign Service, well, that's fine. There are internships at the Department of State and overseas. Unfortunately, they are not paid internships, and so it's not. I'm very sorry about this. There are a few internships that are available with a little bit of money, but not many. But it's a great opportunity to get to know what the work of the Department of State is, either in Washington or sometimes overseas. The test is very general. It has to do with a knowledge of what's going on in the world. So instead of worrying about your major, and if you're interested in the Foreign Service, I would read The Economist, The New York Times, The Washington Post, or whatever. That's how if you have a consistent pattern of reading about the world, that's how you would be prepared for the exam. There's also an English usage section. And it is an important part of the work of the Foreign Service, is to be able to write back to the Department of State about what's going on. If you can't write, your supervisor has to rewrite, and you've wasted a lot of people's time. So it is a very important part of the exam. Once you pass the written exam, there's an oral exam. And the oral exam is how you think on your feet. There is a little bit of role playing, what you would do in a given situation if you were overseas, and it's sort of how confident. Again, we're getting back to this confidence. How confident you would be. Nobody expects you to have all the right answers in an exam like that, but it's how you express what you believe is the right thing to do. I also recommend, if you're interested, take the exam, the actual exam for practice. Nobody ever knows whether you took it before. Maybe you're not ready to take it, seriously for 4 or 5 years, but take the exam. It'll give you an idea of what it's like and where the gaps in your education might be. Things have changed. 40% of women now are members of the general Foreign Service. Many women ambassadors around the world. When I went to Ecuador, I was the 4th woman in a row to be ambassador to Ecuador. Right now, since then it's now 2 men, but you just never know. I also join with my colleagues in the whole question of mentorship, getting to know people who, in the Foreign Service or who have had very interesting careers. It's definitely the best way to go is to just pass on your knowledge to people, but also to be willing to listen to people who have had interesting careers. So thank you very much.
Right, great. Thank you very much. Let's start with some questions that you have. Any? And you could tell us in general, or you'd like to direct them to someone. So. And I'll pass this down in the.
One of the biggest questions everybody has about women being professionals is the concept of family and marriage. So how did you address that, or how did you address that? Like how was that balance actually?
Not addressing that currently, so I would very happily not addressing that. When I compare my life to my friends, I'm very happy about it, actually.
There's all kinds of controversy now by all these different authors about can you have it all? Can you have it all at the same time? Da 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 da. You got to figure out what's going to work for you and your partner. That's probably the most critical thing. I was always amazed at the young women that worked for me who had babies and were there working on a deal at 4 in the morning, breastfeeding while they're working on paperwork. I admire them. Sometimes I used to think they should be committed. How they did it all, I don't know. But they've managed to work it out with themselves, with their partner, and with people around them. So, it's hard. And until there's better child care, I'm going to get on my soapbox, until there's better child care and things like that help women, because the majority of women are the child caregivers and the house kind of organizers, wives, mothers. It's going to be tough because child care is not cheap. Good child care is expensive, and that's important. So, it's hard. Talk to someone that you feel comfortable with and who's done that recently and say, how did you manage? It may not work for you, but it'll help you in terms of thinking about it.
In the Foreign Service, being a single woman, I think, is a little bit more difficult. However, for one thing, because it's funny, men can, they'll get to an embassy and maybe they even start dating a local employee within the embassy and they end up marrying that person. And it's just, women in the Foreign Service don't generally marry somebody who is, I'm making horrible generalizations, but don't marry the local employees as much. And so sometimes we have what's called tandem couples, and there are quite a few. It's where both people are Foreign Service officers. They've met at some point. They have to, though, make sure that their assignments are synchronized or make the decision to be assigned to different places at different times. However, I've known lots of women who, are married, have kids. Some have been fortunate enough to have husbands who travel following them. Often when it's a husband is a writer or whatever, and especially nowadays with with computers and everything, so much more can be done. There are people who are accountants that can be accountants wherever they are, and at the same time he is at home with the kids or whatever. It is something to think about. It's a problem for when this is also for men when there's a limited number of jobs available at the embassies that aren't for Foreign Service officers or aren't local employees. And those aren't very often very well-paying jobs. And so, or you have a degree, you're a lawyer. What are you going to do in Ecuador with an American law degree? It's very hard. Or you're a nurse and you don't meet the requirements in the country you're in, and that can be hard. So it's one of those things that if you are a couple, you really have to know that you're both glad to do this and look forward to being assigned back in Washington. On the other hand, the kids get great education, you get great housing, and there are many, many advantages too.
I don't have a family, nor do I have children, but I've asked my coworker who has 3 children and is in the same department as I am, and I've asked her how she's done it. I mean, her children are older, but in equal measure, she had a job prior to this one where she was selling cars, actually, and she would have to work Monday through Friday and then every other Sunday. And for me not to have a family now, to have a career that basically is my world. I mean, that's all I do. I go to work and I sleep and I go back to work. And right now I can't figure out how that puzzle would work for me to have a family. So I've asked my coworker this, and she said, it's just things become a priority to you and your priorities shift. And if you want something, you're going to figure out a way to make it work, regardless if it's wanting to work full-time, at a job and have a family. It will work out, and you just have to trust that and realize that, if you want something, you'll figure out the best way how to accommodate in your own life, I think. So it's just very interesting, though, because my job is very demanding. So to kind of, I guess visualize and understand that balance of how it would eventually maybe be someday, I don't know. I don't have the right answer, but I don't think there is a right answer per se.
I would like to say, too, if you want some tips on multitasking as a woman, go to Africa, and you will see them with babies strapped on their backs, sometimes 2, with stuff in one hand, pounding the grains on the other, while they're also doing the laundry and feeding the family and serving the men tea under the trees. So that's a good idea, too. You can always check them out. They will inspire you, right? There's a quote that says, if hard work and dedication were really a sign of your ability to gain wealth, then every woman in Africa would be a millionaire. And it's very true.
Other questions?
I just wanted to follow up too. I've interviewed some people. Please present yourself very professionally and neatly. Even if it's just a volunteer or internship position, it really makes a difference. And your letter of recommendation will reflect that, first glance, that first impression, and it'll get you that opportunity to get the job if you come across polished. Because I don't know what's going on, but the younger people don't seem to be very polished. I've had, girls come into interviews wearing the yoga pants. I'm like, those aren't even pants. So polish yourself. And I would also like to say, never stop learning. Never stop. Always keep learning. Always keep pursuing knowledge. Learn languages. Do whatever you can. Because every little bit you can take whatever you extract from and put on your resume, depending what you're applying for. So have that wealth of experience, and then you can just pick and choose accordingly, and you'll have a wealth of references as well. So, and one other thing, lead by example. It's very important. That's what I say.
Okay, so any questions? Paris?
Okay, so I've noticed that all of you are in higher positions of power in your careers. So, and I know that being a woman is kind of it's not a lot of fields are male dominated. So how, in addition to being a woman of color, how do you think that ties into how difficult it is, or how hard you have to work towards that position of power?
Well, you could work it to your advantage, because oftentimes they need to show that they are diverse. And these positions that often don't have that diversity want that. So that could be your shoe-in if you play your cards right. That being said, it is going to be more difficult. And I hate that truth. I hate that reality. I don't want that to be the reality. I struggle every day to fight that so that it could become more equal, not just for women, but for people of color, for immigrants, and it's sad that we're in a world where just how you look is going to affect that, but it does, and knowing it and owning up to it, and just doing the best you can. As a woman of color, know it, but don't let it stop you. Don't let it push you harder. Let it drive you farther, For me and for the people that are white, I would say, own up to our privilege. Acknowledge it. So that then maybe some of these, you know, invisible barriers could be torn down with the acknowledgement and with that, you know, passion that you might show.
I also think that work as hard as you can. Master what you're doing so that they have to come to you. And it doesn't make any difference how old you are, because if you are the best in that subject area, and you can learn that while you're working, you know, and then let somebody come to you and you show them, you demonstrate, one, how much you know, and two, how willing you are to share. That you will assume power that you don't even know that you have. So work hard and be the best that you can be.
And maybe find, you know, mentors that
Mentor-
have done it.
Mentors
you know?
are amazing.
I know a lot of really strong, powerful women of color that have gotten there through hard work, and I'd be happy to send them your way.
And I know that at the Department of State, particularly in Washington, there's a lot of mentoring and networking among people, you know, different groups, you know, Hispanic Foreign Service officers, African American Foreign Service officers, different people that are, and usually it's ambassadors or former ambassadors who are at the top of some of these groups who want to make sure that they have done everything they can to help out others.
Yeah, just kind of push the envelope, like I said, you know, get the ball rolling, make sure you are that motivating force, and master whatever skill you're passionate about, or, you know, whatever industry you really want to take part in. Do the very best you can, and I think that applies to anyone that's trying to work their way up. And be the one that's going to initiate projects and talk to people. Don't be afraid to kind of go outside of your comfort zone a little bit. Talk to someone that you've never met before. Reach out on LinkedIn, Twitter, all these very accessible platforms where you can connect with people that are willing and able to help you. Going back to the mentorship, I mean, if someone were to reach out to me in regards to needing help or advice, number one, I would be flattered. I would just love that. Number two, I would be so happy to share what I've learned in the past 3 years with anyone else that's going through the same thing. So really just, you know, we want movers and shakers. People and the world that we live in now, we're looking for people that are going to rattle us up a little bit, ask questions, you know, be persistent. I think that's sort of underrated. You know, persistence is really key, because then people aren't forgetting about you, about, you know, who you are and about what you want and where your goals are, and what, you know, you've kind of thought about where you're headed. So persistence, and just master whatever art and whatever industry you really want to get into.
And one other thing I failed to mention, I didn't even know this when I was in college, but there's a lot of committees out there going on, whether they be in the neighborhood, or I co-chair the Healthy Cleveland Committee for Healthy Eating, promoting healthy eating in our city. There's also county level committees, there's state level committees, and oftentimes they want the voice of the young people. They want your dedication. They will give you research tasks, and you can prove yourself. And I've actually hired interns because they were on my committee. That from Cleveland State. So join those committees too. Look out for these opportunities. They're volunteerships. You know, you're not going to get paid, but what you learn, and you know, if you show that you're a go-getter in those, that's going to be the most direct proof to all the other professionals that are at that table. And these committees have a lot of really awesome professionals at the table. So just market yourself.
Great, thank you so much.